turning it on. That would be helpful to me because then I can see when you're getting bored.
Well, we very seldom get bored.
Yeah, or if you're on your phone, like everyone is during Zoom. I always love it when I'm on a Zoom and I see somebody like this. Like I can't, figure out what they're doing. Anyway,
Steve, didn't they announce the wrong section for today?
I don't know. What did they announce, Marty?
Last week's thing instead of Korach.
See, the minute I turn my back on the place, Marty, everything goes to hell. I don't know what to tell you.
We got to keep you here.
They are incorrect. It is Korach.
Yeah.
Korach is the Torah portion.
And
so let's
number 16
portion.
On the announcement of all the Shabbat programming. Was that where you saw it incorrect?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway, Korach. For those of you who have books, phones, tablets, whatever, Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 16. That's where we're going to begin. Numbers 16. Third Parsha, in the book of Numbers. Okay. Let's say the blessing, and then we will launch in. You are going to be amazed, for those of you who may not already be familiar with this Torah portion. By the time we're done, it's going to feel like we were watching CNN and Fox for an hour, because it is amazing how this dynamic pre-exists us, and maybe it's in our DNA as humans. But in any case, hey, Nick, welcome. Glad you're with us. How you doing?
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm late.
That's
great.
Good.
Great. So glad to be here.
Good. Okay. Is this your first time, Nick, on this Torah study?
On this, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the group. Before we jump in, tell everybody, give them the elevator pitch.
Oh, hi.
Who are you?
I'm Nick. I'm Nick Taylor. I just completed the Choosing Judaism class with Rabbi Elkin at Wilshire Temple. And I'm doing all of my other journey elements in July and August. And and I was introduced to Rabbi Leder through a colleague months ago, and so he's been advising me and guiding me, and I'm so glad to be here.
Have you scheduled the mikveh yet? Do we have a date?
We don't have a date, but I suggested a few to Rabbi Elkin, and since we're doing it on the beach, it'll be requires a little more coordination.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There are no shark attacks in the Santa Monica. You'll be all right.
I'm afraid to show my ignorance, but I'd like to know, when you do the mikvah, I thought that was for women, and
no,
it is not.
Well, it is. So women use the mikvah more frequently, traditionally. Yeah. So women go to the mikvah for something called nida, which means purity.
Yes.
And they go 2 weeks after the last day of their period to the mikvah. Mm-hmm. Then they can have sex for a couple of weeks, which the rabbis weren't fools, was also when they were ovulating. And, so they go monthly. Some people go before Shabbat. Some people go before the high holy days. Some people go after some kind of tragic difficulty that they want to put behind them. So women have a regular monthly reason to go. Men, traditional men, required to go if they have a nocturnal emission, and many men go for other voluntary reasons. Grooms often go, brides often go, but the thing common to men and women for mikvah is conversion. They just don't go at the same time for obvious reasons.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, 1 second, Roy, how many of you have ever been to or in or both a mikvah?
seen it.
Okay, so about half. That's what I expect. Roy, go ahead.
My question is, I thought when you were in the mikveh, you're supposed to be totally bare. So
You
how
are.
do they work it through the beach?
So,
Mm,
okay, so
Reform.
hey, I think Roy wants to know what your date is for that thing. He wants to see this in action. All right, the way it works,
I like my, girlfriend, so.
yeah, the way
It's
it
going to be
works,
great.
the way it works is this. In a crowded beach situation, we take like a long piece, like sheet kind of thing, but it's much longer than it is tall, and it will only be men out there with you, and you kind of create almost like a donut with the person in the middle, walk them out to the water. You just have to be deep enough to be able to pick your feet up and have your head under the water, just like the mikveh at AJU where you were. So maybe 3 feet, 4 feet, something like that. And you kind of create this protective visual barrier around the person, and then you walk them out, and they put on a bathing suit or whatever. So everyone's modesty is protected, or privacy is protected. That's how you do it. Although, if it was an exclusively male beach in the case of a man, or exclusively female in the case of a woman, you don't have to go through any of that generally. But
Right.
those beaches exist in Israel. They don't exist here.
Wasn't our temple going to build a mikveh?
Yeah.
What?
You want to know what happened? The Resnick campus went from 25 million to 57 million. And if I said to the board, let's buy a little building in West LA and run a mikveh, you would be visiting me at the Neuropsych Institute at UCLA, because that's where they would lock me up. But I do hope we pull it off someday. I don't see any reason why we can't. I'm sure we could find the donor. There are many converts who, are philanthropic and understand the value of the mikvah. But, you got to buy a building. You got to build it correctly. You got to staff it. You charge for it, of course, but you never make back the capital expense. Hopefully it just covers operating expenses. I hope we do it, because I think it's very important to have a liberal mikveh in Los Angeles, which is the third largest Jewish city in the world. And AJU, as we know, has been sold, and that mikveh won't be operational very much longer. So
There's a mikveh right near me on Pico.
yeah, Orthodox mikveh,
Correct.
but they wouldn't let us use it for our conversions, etc.
Mhm.
Okay,
Nor would they use ours, by the way. Yeah, so
because it's Orthodox, right?
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
That's correct.
We're
Yeah.
not from enough.
Well, why do we have to do it in West Los Angeles, where it's more expensive for the land?
Well, I would just say you want to be relatively near
Convenience.
the center of where Jews are and people converting in synagogues. But we could do it maybe further east. I don't know. Sukasa, if you want to learn more, the best mikvah in, I think, the country is a place in Boston called Mayim Chaim, the living waters.
Would you spell it?
MAYIMCHAIM,
I am.
or A.
So can
Or-
you help me understand why it went from 25 million to 57
No.
million?
No, I really can't. Have you ever remodeled a bathroom? I mean, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. No one was more
Well-
disappointed by that than I. But
Okay.
I mean,
There-
nobody wasted a penny, but it turned out to be in worse shape than we imagined.
There is a really nice mikveh here in Scottsdale at Congregation Beth Israel that is open to the non-Orthodox community, which was partially why they built it, so that
Yeah,
there was a mikveh
exactly.
for everyone else. And I've been there. It's very nice. It's very well run, managed.
I'd like to get it done, but right now I don't honestly.
But right
see-
now, that would be the closest.
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. I wanted to make one other point about the mikvah. I didn't think we were going to get into mikvah. Thank you, Nick, very much for this fruitful digression. Uh, the other thing a mikvah is used for is to make objects kosher.
Yeah.
So, for example, if somebody, I don't know, took one of your kosher dishes and accidentally put some bacon on it or something, you can either bury it in the ground to rekosher it, or you can dip it in the mikvah. So the mikvah, it's very interesting to me that the mikvah changes not only the status of a person, but also of an object, which is pretty, I don't know, interesting. It's sort of magic in a way, you know? Anyway, okay, Panina, is it about the mikvah? Okay, this will be our last mikvah comment. Go ahead.
The thing is that you mentioned dishwasher. The Orthodox community in Cleveland, we bought Bash. It has no seams.
Right.
The Bash has no seams, and if you run it through on really hot water, you kosher that.
Yeah, some rabbis will allow that. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They also make one that's half and half, like it has two sections.
Oh,
almost like
okay.
two,
Well, I had the regular one.
yeah, on top of each other. So anyway, okay.
Sounds like a book being born.
No, I don't think so. I think it would be widely sold in a very small circle.
The one that's here.
All right, so let's.
One question.
Oh yes, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so you're saying the AJU mikveh is going to be not AJU anymore, they're going to close it?
Yeah, they sold the building.
Yeah, I know, but they did to Milken, which is a Jewish.
But I don't imagine Milken High School running a mikveh for the community.
All right, okay.
I mean, it's possible, but I think it's very unlikely.
Yeah, because that was a good one. And then there are plans for a mikveh at Mid Wilshire,
Yes.
the Glazer campus.
Yeah. Yep. Just no money. But we'll get there. One thing at a time. Okay. Now, I think we can start. Marty, you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, don't read yet. Everyone, let's join together in the blessing. Okay. Hey, Ivan, good to see you.
Thank you.
How are things in your backyard?
Warm.
Yeah, warm. Yeah, he has a beautiful backyard with trees and birds, and it's the best. Okay, here we go. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, mitzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Okay, which means blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who commands us la'asok b'divrei Torah, to busy ourselves with Torah. Okay, so we're going to get busy. Numbers 16:1. I think what we'll do here is just let Marty read. It's pretty lengthy, the section that I want to read. Let's just read all the way through it without interruption, and then we'll pick it apart and see what's hidden inside. Okay? So, Marty, please.
All right. Now Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kolath, son of Levi, betook himself along with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eli, and on son of Peleth, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen with the chosen assembly men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation?" When Moses heard this, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all of his company, saying, "Come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he has chosen. Do this. You, Korah, and all your band, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Lord. Then the man whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. Moses said further to Korah, hear me, sons of Levi. It is not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you access to him, perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle, and to minister to the community and serve them. Now that he has advanced you and all of your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too? Truly, it is against the Lord that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him? Moses sent for Darm and Abram and the sons of Elam, but they said, we will not come. It is not enough that you brought us from the land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you would also lord it over us. Even if you had brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey and given us possession of fields and vineyards, should you gouge out all those men's eyes? We will not come. Moses was much aggrieved, and he said to the Lord, pay no regard to their oblation.
Wait, Marty, make sure you face forward into your microphone.
I got to read too, and my eyes only go one way. I have not taken the ass of any one of them, nor have I wronged any of them. And Moses said to Korah, tomorrow you and your company appear before the Lord, you and they and Aaron. Each of you take his fire pan and lay incense on it, and each of you bring his fire pan before the Lord, 250 fire pans. You and Aaron also bring your fire pans. Each of them took their fire pans, put fire in them, laid incense on them, and took his place at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and did as did Moses and Aaron. Korah gathered the whole community against them at the entrance of the town of meeting. Then the presence of the Lord appeared to the whole community, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, stand back from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant. But they fell on their faces.
Everybody mute, okay, please. Thank you.
But they fell on their faces and said, O God, sources of the breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? The Lord said to Moses, saying, speak to the community and say, withdraw from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abraham. Moses rose and went to Darm and Abram, the elders of Israel following him. He addressed the community, saying, move away from the tents of these wicked men and teach nothing that belongs to them, and touch nothing that belongs to them. Let you be wiped out for all their sins. So they withdrew from about the abode of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now Dathan and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. And Moses said, by this you shall know that it was the Lord who sent me to do these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these men die as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all their belongings to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that these men have spurned the Lord. Scarcely had he shown, know these men have spurned the Lord. Scarcely had he finished speaking of all these words, when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households. All of Korah's people and their possessions, they went down into Sheol with the belongings with them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said, the earth might swallow us. The fire went forth from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense.
Okay, let's stop there. Okay, so there are a lot of things going on here. You might notice a lot of repetition. We've talked about this before, that there are, when you see two versions of the same story in Torah with very slight differences, we're talking about an edited document created by different schools over a different period of time. And so you can see that kind of woven together here, and we're not going to dig into that today. But in case it's on your mind. Okay. Part of me wants to just say, what is going on here? So let's take a little poll. By show of hands, how many of you feel that Korach has a point? That all of us are holy. What makes you so special? You said you'd bring us to the promised land, and we're not at the promised land. And why do you raise yourself up above us? Aren't we all holy? Aren't we all created in the image of God? So does anybody have any sympathy for that point of view? Okay. Who, on the other hand, feels that Korach was treated fairly? Raise your hand if you think he got what he deserved. Well, if you don't think he has a point, then so there's a middle ground here. You don't agree with him, but you don't feel that raise your hand if you feel the punishment is too extreme for the crime. Okay. So it's interesting. We're pretty evenly divided, even in this relatively small group. And I'm not surprised, because the rabbis are divided and tortured by this Torah portion in certain ways, because it seems unjust. Here we have a revolutionary, and generally speaking, Jews have applauded their revolutionaries, have applauded the protester, have applauded the upstart. We ourselves began that way as a people. I don't think it's an accident that Jews were at the forefront in my lifetime of civil rights, equal rights for women, environmental rights, LGBTQ rights, all of it. The peace movement, the anti-war movement, people's names like Hoffman and Rubin and others. So Betty Friedan, I mean, so many Jews have been on the forefront of social change and have including the labor movement, et cetera, et cetera. So what Korach is doing seems, from one perspective, to be perfectly consistent with our Jewish values. Does anyone have a theory about why he and his followers end up swallowed up in a ball of fire? What did this poor guy do wrong? Go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, it's more of a question, really. Isn't Korach a Levite? And what's the difference between a Levite and an Aaronite?
And a priest. Well, so all right, let's get into the history of this, because this does have something to do with his complaint. So let's back up. Prior to the episode of the golden calf, pre-golden calf, the people who served as, let's say, religious functionaries, high priests, took care of the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, the sacrifices, that group was made up of the firstborn of each tribe. It was a more democratic or broad-based, let's use political terms because that's where we're headed here. It was a broad-based coalition that represented every tribe. It was the firstborn of every tribe. That's what formed, let's call it, the priesthood. Just like in our government, there are three branches. Ancient Israel had a kind of tripartite infrastructure or structure. They had the religious, the political, and the prophetic. The religious branch of ancient Israelite society were Moses, Aaron, and the priests, the Levites, etc. The political was the kingship, and then the prophets were the critics from the outside who went after both the religious and the political. So prior to the golden calf, it was a broader based coalition of firstborns. After the sin of the golden calf, God makes the decision for the priesthood to be exclusively Levitical. Now, this is probably, while not said, is probably part of what's pissing Korach off, that the old system was more fair in his view. And it was. So, and Datan and Aviram come from other tribes, Reubenites, and they, there's a change. And that may be, in other words, the character of Korach may be a way that the Torah is addressing this tension from this change, right? That and a more Levitically focused, I don't know if Levitically is a word or not, but it should be Levitically focused religious domain for ancient Israel. But most scholars believe that, and the rabbis too, that whole change pre and post golden calf is getting addressed and worked out in this story. Okay? So, someone else might have had, Sukasa, did you have your hand up?
I have a note here and that Korach spread fake news and rallied people. I don't know where it came from, but I wrote it in my Chumash. So
we got there fast, didn't we? We're gonna lay this over the current political structure in a few minutes. Brad, go ahead, and then Susan. You got to unmute, Brad. Unmute. Brad, you're on mute.
I'm trying to.
There you go. Go
can
ahead.
You hear me? I'm trying to. There seems to be some confusion about who the offended party is here. First, it's Moses is named. Then Moses and Aaron are named. Then Aaron is named singularly.
Yes.
Then it seems that God reacts as if he's the offended party. So who is the rebellion against?
That's a good question, Brad. And I think where we're headed, what we're going to find out is that we're going to question Korach's motives. Okay, I don't want to go there quite yet, but we're going to. Because you are rightly noting that it's a little unclear, more than a little. And, I often say when someone slams a door, they're not angry at the door. So there's more going on here than his dissatisfaction with the current leadership, which we'll get to. Susan, go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Brad. That is a question. And initially I thought, well, Korach has a point when he says holy, but it was apparently to become holy. And I will say this, I read Jonathan Sachs, and he, from what I understand and remember, said that Korach was doing this not for the sake of heaven,
right,
for the good of the people, but for self-aggrandizement.
Right.
And it was his own personal kind of push.
And very cleverly, Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment said, if you want to tell a lie, it should contain as much of the truth as possible. The best lie is a half-truth.
Yeah.
So, there's that Yiddish expression, a half-truth is a whole lie, and that's correct. So, yes, does Korach present any plan for the betterment of the ancient Israelites? No. Any platform, any structure? Is there any other than you didn't get us to the promised land, we're not there? Is there any specific critique of the way in which Moses and Aaron have conducted themselves or led the people? No. So what we're starting to see here is that this is a power grab wrapped in a populist rhetorical agenda. Everyone is holy, right? And in a sense, this is the thing. He's right about that. Korach is right about that. But even egalitarian societies, of which there are none, but let's just imagine there was, still requires leaders, right? Still requires somebody to enforce the red light at the traffic stop, because, and he's conflating very cleverly, well, aren't we all equal and I should lead? Well, if we're all equal, then you're arguing that no one should lead. But of course, he's actually believes he should lead. This is a power grab wrapped in half-truths. And that's the bottom line of what's happening here. And it is a highly populist approach. He's just out for the little guy. Just that's all he's trying to do. He's a defender of the underrepresented and underappreciated. So the rhetorical strategy of contemporary politics hasn't changed in 3,500 years. It's exactly what we're seeing today. So, and by the way, I'm not necessarily saying only from one side. This is how political arguments are structured. Everyone deserves better. And I'm for everyone. Just give me the power, so I'll be different than everyone. Okay, so I want to go now to what Susan brought up. How do the rabbis see, how do they understand what was wrong? What was the problem with Korach's egalitarian argument? And it's really goes to what Susan and Jonathan Sachs and pretty much every rabbi who's ever preached on this Torah portion talks about, which is something we call machloket b'shem shamayim, a disagreement, an argument for the sake of heaven. In other words, a principled argument, a principled debate in search of truth, right? And power does not necessarily equal truth. Just because someone is in power or has power does not mean that person represents, speaks, or upholds truth. So Korach is seeking power, but he has no truth, if that kind of makes sense. Now, what is this argument, b'shem shamayim, this argument for the sake of heaven? It's an elevated discourse in search of truth by both sides. So let me just read to you from the Mishnah how the rabbis look at that in the directed at this Torah portion. Here's what they say. This is from Mishnah Avot, in case you're wondering. Any dispute for the sake of heaven will have enduring value. Somebody's not on mute. Make sure you're muted. Okay, let me start again. Any dispute for the sake of heaven will have enduring value. But every dispute not for the sake of heaven will not have enduring value. What is an example? This is the rabbis asking. What is an example of a dispute for the sake of heaven? The answer, the dispute between Hillel and Shammai, and we'll get into that. Now, why is the dispute between the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai in the Talmud, second generation rabbis, Talmudic generation, why is that considered for the sake of heaven? Here's how they used to argue. Hillel, by the way, the school of Hillel won almost every argument between the two schools. Not everyone, but almost everyone. The law was in accord with the school of Hillel because they were kind and modest, because they studied not only their own rulings, but also the rulings of the school of Shammai, and because they taught the words of the school of Shammai before their own. They studied, understood, and fairly represented the views of the opposition with kindness and modesty. And that is an argument for the sake of heaven. That is an attempt at a conversation, not a fight. That is an argument, a conversation, a debate where everyone recognizes that
this meeting is being recorded.
Where everyone recognizes that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we ought to listen twice as much as we speak. So that is how the rabbis frame an argument for the sake of heaven. It is less about the details and more about mutual respect. And so I've said this before, this rabbinic concept of peace is not the absence of conflict. That is not the Jewish ideal. Barry, could you mute, please? Nadine, do something there with your husband, will you? Okay, he's impossible. The highest ideal is not lack of conflict. It's how we resolve conflict. If we resolve it with an open mind, respect for the other point of view, kindness and modesty, that's peace, not the lack of disagreement. So that is an argument b'shem shamayim. Again, it's not about the details of the argument. It's not what Hillel and Shammai argued about. It's how they chose and agreed to argue. Penina, make sure you unmute.
Right. I think at this particular point, it wasn't what was said, it's when it was said.
Where did you say where?
Not the, when,
yeah,
not
okay.
where, when.
Got it.
It's not enough confusion that they had because of the spies that came back and everybody had his own opinion. They are a giant, they're not giant. It's okay the way you did it, it's not okay. It's a time of confusion and fear and uncertainness anyhow, without somebody coming and bringing up another problem or another issue or another point of view. They had enough to deal with.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And demagogues often look for social unrest as the opportunity.
Exactly. It's not the time to say things without, unless it's something that you are actually going to save life of somebody. But here it was just criticism.
Yeah.
So it was not the right time.
That's
Nobody
right.
wanted to hear another if and another oy vey. That's it.
Yeah, and you know, this dynamic, Carol, I'll get to you in 1 second. This dynamic plays out. You know, I'm one of, I don't know, I haven't seen too many rabbis, non-Orthodox rabbis saying it, but I'm saying, you know, publicly and privately, this business about Bibi Netanyahu right now, really? We're in the middle of a war, possibly
exactly.
or 3, like
somebody had Zooms of who can hate him the most.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not a fan.
It's terrible.
I'm not a fan, but there's a time and a place, and this is
right.
not. So
can we do better? Then better shut up, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So Carol, please.
I'm unmuted. Thank you so much about demagogues. The point you made about one can have power, but maybe truth will be irrelevant, and that is the mainstay of the success of a demagogue. I'm thinking about the debates, the gentlemanly, the courteous debates between William F. Buckley Jr. and David Frost. And they were on opposite ends of a political spectrum, but they had decorum. They were consider it. And William F. Buckley Jr. would say, sir, you make a good point, but I'd like to address, and they would discuss it. They didn't bludgeon each other with sound bites.
That's right. And in the Talmud, by the way, in the Talmud, every minority opinion is recorded. You know how the Supreme Court works today? It comes directly from Talmud. Every minority opinion, let me just see if I have anything here. 1 second. Shoot. They're in my study at Temple. If I showed you a page of Talmud, many of you have seen it, there's commentary upon commentary. Everyone's view is recorded and respected. And the opposition's view was taught first. So now, how do we deal, however, with those of us who raised our hands, including myself, that, Korach had a legitimate perspective that aren't we all holy? Right? To which I would say no. And I think this also is a very important point. When God says be holy, God doesn't say you are holy. God says be holy. Kedoshim tihiyu. In other words, every human being can be holy, but not every human being is holy. We all have within us the freedom and the potential for holiness. But it takes an act of agency to exercise that freedom and ability to be holy. So yes, so you can see how this subtle change by Korach. Aren't we all holy? No, we're actually not, especially you, brother, but we all have the ability, potential, but not everyone is holy. And this I think is a critical, because he's right that Judaism has these egalitarian leanings. Sachs writes about this too, that there is an egalitarian proclivity in Judaism. There is, but that does not mean a leaderless society. Only a society in which the leader recognizes that he or she is important and everyone else is just as important. I am important and everyone else is just as important. That's a powerful idea. And deeply Jewish, egalitarian. I've often said there's no hierarchy of value to life in Judaism, which is another way of kind of explaining the egalitarianism that I think exists in Judaism. Every human being is unique. Every human being has their own abilities and potentials, unlike anyone else's. And that's the egalitarian proclivity in Judaism. It's very strong and very profound, but it does not mean we don't need someone in charge. We do. Now, what it also means from an egalitarian perspective, and here the Reform movement really, really leaned into this idea. So, look, if you were born into a Levitical family, then you were in the priesthood, period. If you were born into a royal family, then you could become a king. And there are dynasties, as we know, in certain factions of Judaism. Every Chabad rabbi in LA you talk to, his last name is Cunin because it's a dynasty, right? So I'm exaggerating, but we have dynasties that you're born into. So how is it possible then that we can have this egalitarian structure when not all of us are in the Lucky Sperm Club? And the rabbis deal with this in, I think, a very beautiful way, which I also want to use to embrace all of you who have, participated for so many years and will continue to with me in Torah study. I want to read you something. This is from the Rambam, from Maimonides. With 3 crowns was Israel crowned. Again, you see this tripartite structure a lot in Judaism. There are many phrases in the Talmud about Al Shlosha Devarim, Ha'olam Omed. The world stands upon 3 things. It's a different 3 things in each of them, which is kind of beautiful, but all right. With 3 crowns was Israel crowned. In other words, the Jewish people are sacred, holy, derive their power in one of 3 ways. The crown of the priesthood was bestowed on Aaron and his descendants. Okay, if you were born into the Levitical tribe, Aaron, you're in. That's one crown, the priesthood. But that's a crown based on biology. 2, the crown of kingship was conferred on David and his successors, the house of David. Also, Lucky Sperm Club. Biological crown. But the crown of Torah is for all Israel, is for all Jews. Whoever wishes to wear that crown, let them come and take it. And then the Rambam ends with this very powerful statement. A Torah scholar of illegitimate birth, a Torah scholar whose mother was a prostitute or whose, father was a pagan, a Torah scholar of illegitimate birth, meaning could never be in the priesthood or the kingship. A Torah scholar of illegitimate birth takes precedence over an ignorant high priest. That's the egalitarianism of Judaism. It's based on the purity of your motivation and knowledge. So you can see this opening, this crack of daylight for Korach to try to insert himself purely out of ego, wrapped in this sort of higher cause rhetoric, which is complete bullshit. And I just love this. A Torah scholar of illegitimate birth takes precedence over an ignorant high priest. That's the Judaism we can be proud of, and the centrality of Torah study, because the way that Torah puts it is that when we study Torah, we become a nation or a kingdom of priests. You can get in. You can get in without being a Levite or from the house of David through Torah. So you're all kings and queens and priests and emperors and empresses, all of us who study Torah. Okay, I want to pause for any comments, thoughts. It's good, huh? Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I really like you're connecting now the crowns of Torah with becoming. And that's what Judaism seems to be all about. There's also if and then the conditional that we have in one of the groups of commandments. If you do this, then these will be the benefits. So that, I think, your combination of those is very impressive, powerful. But I should say this also comes right after the spies.
Yes.
When they know they're not going to be in getting into the promised land. So what do they have to lose? I mean, this could be also some depression from it and a change of leadership, as often happens when there's some really devastating news.
This was sort of Penina's point, is that Moses is vulnerable. Moses and Aaron are vulnerable at this point. And the people are vulnerable because they're afraid. And that's when Korach seizes upon the opportunity to essentially attempt a coup using populist rhetoric. And he fails. Look, whoever wrote this story was trying to teach us a lesson, right? My father's lesson, stop crying or I'll really give you something to cry about. Okay, that was my father's entire parenting strategy, by the way. And another decade or two in psychotherapy, I'll be fine. So, broke, but fine. Okay. Yes, the timing is suspect. The people are anxious, afraid. They know they're all going to die. Some have already died. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It is a low blow for sure. And
Exactly.
and you know, the message is pretty clear. The message is clear. Because Abraham was rebellious, right? Abraham left it all behind, started a new religion, didn't know, I mean, he was a rebel, but he was a rebel with a cause. Right? Okay, Dick. And then Karen. Got to unmute. All right, let's go to Karen and then we'll come back to you, Dick. Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry to move into how many centuries later. Aren't we there now?
Yeah, we are. We are. Which means this is in the DNA of society, political culture. It's in the just DNA of what it means to be in a community and led. You know, because at this point in the desert, it's not really a society because they're on the move. It's a community. It's not a society. And it doesn't have all the trappings of a society. That comes later. But yeah, this is what populism is all about. And somebody put the note in that Hitler rose to power because of the economic devastation of Germany in the First World War. And you might see behind me here, right here, are the 4 volumes of Winston Churchill's The Second World War. And the first volume of those 4 volumes is Churchill basically talking about post-World War I Germany and the mistakes that were made, how things could have been done differently to have prevented World War II and the rise of Adolf Hitler in World War II. By the way, every general, fights the last war. That is why there was a Marshall Plan after World War II. After pummeling Germany, we turned right around and rebuilt, so as to avoid the kind of dynamic that gave Korach an opening and gave Adolf Hitler an opening and gives, even in our day, people openings. So, yeah. Go ahead, Dick.
Maybe a bit off, but at least twice you would refer to the rabbis and the Talmud. Why in 40 years should my great-grandchild not say, Rabbi Leder says? What makes the knowledge of 2,000 years ago better than what your knowledge is today?
Well, I wouldn't say better, just different. And ideally, we build upon each generation. So the Talmud at a certain point is codified. Like at a certain point, it's codified, but it's not the end of conversation or commentary. It just takes a little bit different form today. And it is more amorphous because anybody with a keyboard, and a computer can go on the record for anything. But look, it does happen. I mean, it happens to me. I do get letters and private messages and all kinds of stuff from all over the world all the time, with people saying, when you said this in this book, it moved me so much, or when you said that, or you're teaching about this, or your sermon about that. So it does happen, Dick, but it's in a less, it's amorphous. Now, there is also a type of Jewish literature called responsa literature. And responsa literature was very, very important, I would say 12th, maybe 13th to today for some communities. Responsa literature is where Judaism, particularly in Eastern Europe, was structured where there was a rabbi who was sort of in charge of a region. It might have been the only synagogue in that region or not, but there were commonly recognized rabbinic authorities who could, a person who could be a paskan, a person who could rule on a matter of Jewish law, like a judge. And responsa literature is literature, it's a literature of questions and answers. If you had a question, I'm going to try and think about, okay, it says we shouldn't light a fire on Shabbat, but I want to, but can I turn on a light switch? I'm making this up. You would write to the authority in what's called a sheila or she'ela, a question. You would wait months for a letter to come back with a tshuva, an answer, a response. That's why it's called responsa literature. And then these rulings would get collected, much like in our legal system today, and people would abide by them until there was a challenge, and then maybe another ruling, and the law sort of evolved, and it's continuing to evolve, particularly in areas where we have to apply this ancient wisdom to a modern reality that didn't exist at the time. So the big hot issues and areas of responsa literature today have much more to do with technology, medicine. You know, can you implant a pig's heart? Can you use a pig's valve in a traditional Jew's valve replacement surgery? Well, that question clearly wasn't asked by the rabbis of the Talmud, but the question of can you eat pork if it will save your life and you would otherwise die, that was asked. And so the art of the responsa literature now is looking for the precedent and applying it to what seems like an unprecedented situation. For example, astronauts in space, which will, I think, become as common as air travel at some point in our society, in the world. When is it Shabbat when the sun rises and sets 24 times in a day? What do you do? Rabbinical figures are going to dig into this. There are people who spend their lives doing nothing but. And, you know, all of that. The infertility, IVF, all of that is almost, it is in a sense a biblical argument. Are we taking cloning? What do we do about cloning? Are we playing God, or is this what God wants of us? It's medical responsa, medical ethical issues. That's where the hot energy is now in the responsa world. But that could change too. So it does go on, Dick, and it's just that no one rabbi's words these days will be studied by people for their entire lifetimes in a yeshiva. That's the difference. It's wider, thinner, fewer people. There's so much out there that it's one big buffet of Jewish thought out there now. Which is also important. You have to find a rabbi you trust. Anyway. Oh my goodness, it's 1:04. Ay. Okay. I gotta end. I'll see you guys again whenever I am next teaching. I don't know when it is, but remember, you've earned the crown of Torah. So you are equal to a priest or a king or a queen or a priestess. Okay? Don't forget. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a
Bye.
great weekend. Have a great week.
Shabbat shalom.